You won't believe what happened when my son's wife called the police on me, without even realizing I owned the home she lived in. This is a story about truth, boundaries, and the moment you have to fight for your legacy. I hope you'll stay with me until the end. And if this story speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support truly helps us continue sharing stories like this. My name is Nadine Whitlow. I'm 56 years old, and I've lived a life built on love, resilience, and real estate. I manage a modest but successful property business here in Savannah, Georgia. I've also been a widow for 12 years now. My husband, Walter, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. Since then, my entire world has revolved around my son, Jordan. He's everything to me. 3 years ago, my mother passed. She left me her home, an elegant red brick colonial in Charleston, South Carolina. The kind of house that speaks of generations, with magnolia trees out front and a porch that practically hugs you when you step onto it. The kitchen always smelled of lemon balm and warm sugar. That house was my childhood home. And when Walter died, it became my refuge. That home, filled with the laughter and struggles of 3 generations, felt sacred. When my mother passed it down to me, I felt honored. And not long after, I decided to offer that same gift to Jordan. Jordan was 29 then, finally getting on his feet after some rough patches. He'd been bouncing from job to job, but he'd recently landed a steady position at a regional marketing firm and was eager to leave behind his cramped 1-bedroom apartment. He had always dreamed of a house that felt like home. So when he called me one afternoon and said he was ready for something new, I saw my chance to pass on something meaningful. "I want you to live here," I told him. "No rent. Fix it up if you want. One day, maybe you'll make it yours." He choked up. "Are you serious, Mom?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Thank you." That moment, hearing the emotion in my son's voice as I handed him the keys, was one of the proudest of my life. He was finally stepping into his own. But I had no idea the woman he brought through that front door would try to erase everything I'd built. Her name was Zaria. She and Jordan had met in Atlanta through a circle of friends. She was charismatic, always polished, and so confident it bordered on theatrical. I tried to give her a fair chance. After all, Jordan cared about her. That was enough for me at first. Still, something about her felt performative, like she was playing a role in a movie no one else had been cast in. Within weeks, she moved in. Too quickly, if I'm being honest. Before long, she was answering the door like the lady of the manor, reworking the decor, and acting as if my family's treasures were eyesores. My mother's antique sideboard, the wall of family photos, all of it seemed to vanish or get replaced. I first noticed the shift one afternoon when I dropped by with homemade peach cobbler. I hadn't called, I'd never needed to. It was my house, after all. Zaria opened the door. "Oh," she said, blinking as if I'd caught her off guard. "You didn't text ahead." "I just came by to bring some dessert," I smiled, holding up the Tupperware. "Thought you and Jordan might enjoy it." Her eyes skimmed the dish and returned to me. "Well, we're in the middle of a few things. Thanks, though." She didn't step aside. She didn't offer me in. She just stood there. That night, Jordan called to apologize. "She's just trying to make the space feel like hers," he said. "She's big on energy." I let out a polite laugh, but deep inside, something shifted. A whisper of warning in my gut. Something was being rewritten, and I wasn't invited into the next chapter. Then, little by little, things began to disappear. My grandmother's quilt, which had draped over the staircase railing since before Jordan was born, gone. The wooden rocking chair where my mother once sat knitting while humming to herself, replaced by a plastic stool that looked like it belonged in an art museum. Even the old dining table, dented and worn from generations of family meals, had been swapped for a soulless slab of glass. I asked Jordan where everything went. "Zaria's updating the style," he said. She's got a vision. She wants to modernize it. But this house already has a soul, I replied gently. It holds memories. It tells our story. Jordan didn't respond. He didn't need to. I could feel it already. This place was slipping away from me. Zaria wasn't openly rude, not exactly. But she had a way of speaking like the house was theirs. Not his. Theirs. She referred to it as our home with ease, even pride, as if she had earned it. As if her name was etched into the front steps. Then came the moment I knew things were changing for the worse. It was Sunday, our dinner night. Jordan and I had kept the tradition going ever since he moved in. Every other week, no exceptions. I knocked, then let myself in with my key. Like always. The living room had changed again. The warmth, the history, gone. The space was gray and sterile, like something out of a showroom. There were no family photos. No books on the side tables. It felt cold. Zaria stood near the kitchen island, a glass of red wine in hand. "Oh, you still have a key?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I do," I said, unsure how to respond. She took a long sip and shrugged. "Jordan and I were just talking about setting new boundaries, you know, now that we're engaged." My heart thudded. Engaged? She flashed a ring I hadn't seen before. "He proposed last week. We were going to tell you over dinner." I forced a smile. "Congratulations." But something inside me cracked. Not because Jordan was getting married. No, I wanted him to be happy. But because I suddenly saw what I hadn't allowed myself to see before, I was no longer part of this home. I had given them shelter, a place built on memory and love, and I was being pushed out of it. And as I would soon learn, Zaria wasn't finished yet. Just a week after their engagement, Jordan called. His voice was careful, almost rehearsed. "Mom, would you mind not stopping by so often? Zaria just wants us to create our own rhythm. You know, make the place feel like it's really ours." I felt something tighten in my chest. Still, I told him I understood. I didn't want to be the overbearing mother. But I wasn't just his mother, I was the owner of that house. The keeper of its past. And I was being pushed out like a tenant overstaying her welcome. The next time I came by, I texted ahead like a guest requesting permission. Zaria answered the door in a silk robe, sipping coffee, her expression blank. "Oh. Nadine. You're early." I said 3, I reminded her, stepping forward. She offered a cold smile. "Well, Jordan's not back yet. But I guess you can come in." I stepped into a house I barely recognized. The handmade curtains my mother had sewn were gone, replaced by stiff linen panels. On the wall where our family portrait used to hang was now a collection of abstract art, shapes and smudges that meant nothing. In the dining room, I stopped short. The old hutch, my father's hutch, was missing. The one he had refinished with his own hands, sanding and staining it every spring, proud of how it stood through decades of use. "What happened to the hutch?" I asked, quietly. Zaria waved it off. "That big clunky thing. We donated it. Didn't fit the aesthetic." I blinked. "You donated it?" She sipped her coffee. "It was just furniture." But it wasn't. That hutch held every birthday candle, my mother's serving bowls, the old gravy boat my father refused to replace. It was a museum of our lives. Zaria poured another cup. "I'm sure you get it. Jordan and I are creating something new. We can't live in a museum of your memories." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mother's words echoed in my head, "Protect that house like it holds your heartbeat." And I had, until now. Over the following months, my visits became fewer and strained. Zaria always hovered, correcting Jordan's stories, dodging my questions, and dismissing any mention of the past. Let's not dwell, she'd say, all sugar and smiles. It's a new chapter now. Even Jordan seemed altered. The warmth in his voice had cooled. He paused before speaking, as if measuring every word. Then came the day everything unraveled. It was a Saturday. I needed to grab some old documents, family papers, financial files. I had always kept them in a drawer in the study. I texted Jordan. No response. So I used my key. The house was silent. The staircase, once lined with framed school portraits of Jordan, was bare. In their place hung a giant canvas of chaotic black lines titled Ascension. I walked to the study, but the drawer was gone. In its place, Zaria had transformed the room into a makeshift studio. A white backdrop, ring light, makeup kits, and a camera tripod cluttered the space. I scanned the room, searching desperately for the cabinet where I'd kept our wills, my mother's deeds, Jordan's school records. Gone. Panicked, I moved toward the smaller cabinet near the window. Also empty. Then I noticed Zaria's laptop, open on the desk. On the screen was an online storefront, Zura's and Home. An item was listed, a Tiffany-style lamp. My grandmother's lamp. One of a kind, handed down through 3 generations. The price, $750. I scrolled, heart thudding. There was more. My father's framed military flag. The fine silver set we used only at Christmas. Paintings from the foyer. Jewelry boxes. Porcelain. All of it catalogued for profit. Zaria had been selling my family. I didn't move when the door opened downstairs. Click, 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 her heels against the hardwood. Jordan, she called. I stepped out of the office. She spotted me and froze. Nadine. What are you doing here? I came for documents, I said. Where's Jordan? Her arms crossed. Out. With friends. I held her gaze. Does he know you've been selling our heirlooms? Her eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. I saw the listings, I said, stepping closer. You're selling memories that aren't yours. And they were never Jordan's to give. They're his now, she snapped. He told me I could do what I wanted. That's funny, I said, pulling a paper from my bag. Because this deed? It's still in my name. I never signed over the title. Zaria's face drained of color. He's staying here rent-free because I love him, I continued. But this house? It's mine. And so were those things you sold. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I let this go on too long. You erased the pictures, the quilts, the soul of this home. But you won't erase me. 20 minutes later, Jordan came home. He walked in, relaxed, until he saw our faces, me, standing firm, Zaria, arms folded tightly. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. Zaria beat me to it. Your mother broke in. She accused me of theft. And then she claimed this house is hers. Jordan looked at me, stunned. You didn't tell her the truth? I asked. What truth? He said, confused. I handed him the deed. Your grandmother left it to me. The house is legally mine. I let you live here rent-free. But I never told her, and clearly, neither did you. Jordan's face went pale. I didn't think it mattered. She just assumed. Zaria gasped. You lied to me. Jordan turned to her. I never said it was ours. You assumed. And I didn't correct you. I looked him in the eye. She's been selling family history. Your father's metal case. The lamp. The dining table. Where are they now? He was silent. She's been profiting off our past, I said. And you didn't even notice. Zaria's voice shook. Everything I did, he approved. He told me to make the house ours. Jordan exploded. I meant we could repaint. Not erase my family. Then the doorbell rang. We all froze. Zaria practically ran to the door, eager to shift the moment. Two officers stood there, calm but firm. Evening, said the taller one. We received a report about a dispute over property ownership and missing items. I didn't call the police, Zaria said quickly. I did, I replied. Jordan turned to me, shocked. Mom. I gave you every chance to do the right thing, I said. But I won't let my family's history be stolen. Inside, I handed the officers the documents, the deed to the house, copies of my mother's will, photos of the items Zaria had listed for sale. Officer Daniels, the taller of the two, flipped through the papers with a slow, practiced eye. These all seem valid, he said finally. This property is legally in your name, Ms. Whitlow. Zaria scoffed. But I live here. I'm his wife. The second officer, Jenkins, checked the paperwork again. Ma'am, there's no lease agreement here. Legally, your husband resides here under permission. You don't have a claim to the house unless there's a rental contract or ownership documentation. Zaria's voice cracked. You can't be serious. This is my home. Jordan looked like he'd just been hit by a truck. I thought I'd have time to fix things, he murmured. I didn't think any of this would go that far. It went that far when she started erasing everything that made this house a home, I said, softly but firmly. When my keys stopped working. When my son stopped calling. Zaria turned to the officers in a panic. So what now? She just gets to throw me out. No one's being removed tonight, Officer Daniels replied. But Ms. Whitlow does have full legal authority over this property. If she chooses to ask someone to vacate, we're here to make sure it happens peacefully. Zaria's face twisted. You're really going to let her do this to us, she snapped at Jordan. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just said, quietly, I think you already did this to yourself. For the first time, I saw the fog lift in my son's eyes. Shame flickered there. Hurt. But clarity too. He was finally seeing her, really seeing her. Zaria stumbled back a step, like he had struck her. You don't mean that. But he said nothing. The officers waited as Zaria packed an overnight bag in silence. No more accusations. No tears. Just tension in every movement. When she walked out the front door, it shut with a sound that seemed to echo for miles. The quiet that followed was thick. Jordan sank onto the couch, his hands in his hair. I never meant for it to get like this, he said. I know, I told him, sitting beside him. But it did. He looked up, his eyes wet with regret. I let her push you away. I let her change everything. I thought I was building a future, but I was just avoiding the truth. Grief does that to us, I whispered. It makes us cling to illusions. But pretending doesn't protect us. It just delays the inevitable. We sat in that silence for a long time. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't angry. It was honest. Then Jordan stood and disappeared upstairs. 10 minutes later, he came down with a dusty cardboard box in his hands. I found this in the attic, he said, placing it gently on the table. It's what's left. Grandma's letters. Old photo albums. That cookbook she used to use every Thanksgiving. I opened the lid with reverence. The scent of cedar and thyme rose from within. Old paper, aged glue, and family. Let's start putting it back together, he said, and that's exactly what we did. We sat cross-legged on the living room floor until almost 2 in the morning. The floor Zaria had once covered in a minimalist gray rug was now a stage for memory. We sifted through faded Polaroids, folded recipe cards, and yellowed letters with my mother's handwriting still perfect and looping. One photo showed Jordan on his first birthday, icing smeared across his cheeks. Another, my mother on the porch in her Easter hat, holding her famous sweet potato pie. A third, Walter, grinning at the grill in his kiss the cook apron. Jordan laughed softly. This was the year Dad dropped the turkey. I laughed too, remembering. And your grandma refused to eat it even after we rinsed it off. We laughed so hard we had to pause. And in that moment, I heard something I hadn't heard in this house for months, joy. Pure, simple joy. Jordan looked up at me, something deep in his eyes. I didn't know how to say it before, he whispered, but I'm sorry. For letting her shut you out. For letting her touch things that didn't belong to her. For letting it get this far. I reached out and took his hand. You're still my son, Jordan. I never stopped loving you. I just needed you to see it with your own eyes. He nodded. I think I wanted to believe I was in control. That if it looked like a happy life, I wouldn't have to admit I was lost. We sat in silence again, this time without weight. The next morning, Jordan stepped out to clear his mind. I stayed behind, cleaning up the kitchen when I heard the front door open. Heels on hardwood. Jordan. Zaria's voice called. When she saw me, her expression soured instantly. Where is he? He's out, I said calmly. You should have called. This is my home, she snapped, brushing past me like she still belonged. No, I replied gently. It never was. She laughed, loud and bitter. You really think you've won, huh? You think your little drama parade changes anything? Jordan loves me. He's just confused. I didn't move. I'm not here to fight, Zaria. I'm here to protect what matters. She dropped her purse on the counter and began pacing the kitchen like a storm building. He's nothing without me, she hissed. He was falling apart when I met him. I gave him structure. I gave him purpose. I made this dump livable. You erased who he was, I said. You cut him off from his roots. That's not love. That's control. Her eyes flashed. I improved everything. You want to talk legal? I have rights. I invested labor. I'm his wife. I calmly opened a drawer and pulled out a letter. My attorney had prepared it the night we found the listings. This house is legally protected, I said, handing her the paper. No marital claim, no shared financial input, no transfer of deed. You have no legal right to anything here. She snatched the paper and read it quickly. I'll find a lawyer who disagrees, she spat. Good luck, I said simply. In the meantime, you're not welcome here. She tried to push past me toward the hallway. Maybe out of habit. Maybe to find Jordan. I stepped in her path again. You need to leave. Her face twisted, full of fire. You think this is over? That you've won? This isn't about winning, I said. It's about healing. And I won't let you poison this home any longer. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That evening, when Jordan returned, I told him everything. She came back, I said quietly. Looking for you. Pacing through the house like she still belonged. He didn't seem surprised. She left 4 voicemails, he muttered, rubbing his temples. Each one different, angry, sweet, then threatening. It's like she doesn't even hear herself. I touched his shoulder gently. Do you feel safe? His lips curled into a tired smile. I do now. The next day, we sat in my attorney's office and began filing the paperwork for a restraining order. We presented the evidence: emotional coercion, unauthorized sales of family property, and the repeated trespassing. The attorney moved quickly. Within a week, the order was approved. But the damage went deeper than we realized. One afternoon, our elderly neighbor called. She'd seen Zaria weeks ago, loading large boxes into her car under cover of darkness. We followed the trail and uncovered a storage unit rented under an alias. But her email was linked to it. With a police escort, we entered the space. Inside were plastic tubs, cardboard boxes wrapped in duct tape, and a few damaged furniture pieces stacked carelessly. It looked like someone had tried to pack away history and bury it. There was my father's military medals, scattered in a bin like junk mail. The porcelain figurines my mother had hand-painted, broken at the base. The baby blanket I'd crocheted for Jordan, balled up beside a cracked snow globe from his first Christmas. I turned away, my throat tightening. Jordan didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring down at his baby photo crumpled at the bottom of a ripped manila folder. "I thought she loved me," he said finally, his voice hollow. "She loved the idea of what you could give her," I replied. "But not who you truly are." We recovered everything we could. Some pieces were too damaged to repair. Others had simply vanished. But the heart of it. The letters, the family albums, the quilt, those we brought home. And with each item we unpacked, it felt like we were reclaiming something bigger than belongings. We were reclaiming our story. The next several weeks were a slow process of restoration. Not just for the house, but for us. The silence that had once lived in its walls began to lift. The air felt less tense, the rooms less sterile. We reopened the drapes, brought back the blue curtains my mother sewed, rehung our family portraits on the hallway wall. The old dining table came back too, refinished but still familiar, full of nicks and scratches that whispered of Thanksgivings past. One afternoon, Jordan said something that caught me off guard. "I used to think this house was just a building," he said, holding a photo of his grandmother sitting peacefully on the porch. "But it's not. It's our anchor." That same week, he made a decision. He began therapy. His idea, not mine. He found a counselor who specialized in emotional abuse, identity loss, and toxic relationships. I watched him slowly come back to himself. Taller. Stronger. More sure of his words and his worth. He started designing again, logos and branding for small businesses, many of them black-owned. His smile returned. Not the polite one he used to wear for show, but the real one. The one I hadn't seen in a long time. Meanwhile, Zaria's world was falling apart. We discovered she had lied about nearly everything. It started when her attempts to fight the restraining order backfired. The court reviewed her documentation, and found it riddled with falsehoods. Fake credentials from design schools she'd never attended. Business licenses that didn't exist. And then the truth began to spill. She had 2 previous marriages, one of which had ended with a protection order filed against her. Her late husband wasn't dead at all, he lived in Texas and had filed a permanent restraining order over a decade ago. We even found court records of her manipulating finances in her past relationships, spinning lies and weaving herself into other people's homes, lives, and legacies. Zaria wasn't just deceptive, she was practiced at it. This was a pattern. Eventually, she vanished. No calls. No voicemails. Just gone. And yet, I still found myself some mornings staring out the window, wondering how things had spiraled so far. I had tried to give my son a foundation, roots to grow from. Instead, I nearly lost him to someone who saw that gift as something to exploit. But then, one Sunday, everything shifted again. We had returned to our every other week dinner tradition. Just me and Jordan. Sometimes he brought a friend. Sometimes it was just us. This time, he came with a bouquet of sunflowers, his grandmother's favorite. "I have something to tell you," he said, placing them in an old ceramic vase that had once belonged to my great-aunt. I set down the peach cobbler I had just pulled from the oven and waited. "I found an apartment," he said. "Not far. About 10 minutes from here." My heart clenched, but I smiled. That's wonderful, sweetheart. He reached across the table and took my hand. It's not because I want space from you, he said gently. It's because I'm finally ready to stand on my own. Tears filled my eyes. I always knew you would be. But I also want you to keep this house, he continued. Not just in your name, but in spirit. This is your home. Grandma's legacy. I know that now. And one day, maybe I'll have a family. But I'll never pretend this wasn't yours first. We hugged in the kitchen, holding on for what felt like a lifetime. The next weekend, we sat down with my attorney and set up a trust. The house would stay in the family, protected from future entanglements, from opportunists, from legal loopholes. It would never again be treated like an asset to be traded. This house was sacred. By autumn, it had returned to life. Real life. The laughter. The music. The Sunday dinners. Gumbo bubbling on the stove. Cornbread in the oven. Neighbors stopping by with stories and pie. Jordan's therapy was working. His confidence blossomed. His work was thriving again. And me? I finally allowed myself to feel something I hadn't in a long while. Pride. Not just in him, but in myself. For standing up. For not surrendering. For honoring the generations who had built this home with grit, grace, and love. One warm evening as summer slipped into fall, Jordan and I sat on the front porch, sipping sweet tea under a sky stitched with fireflies. The air smelled like damp earth and jasmine, the porch swing creaking softly beneath us. He looked out across the yard, where the old tire swing still hung from the magnolia tree. Do you ever wonder what would have happened, he asked, if you hadn't come into the house that day? I followed his gaze to the yard, remembering Walter's laughter, Jordan's tiny legs flying through the air, the click of my mother's knitting needles. All the time, I said. But I also believe we face truth exactly when we're ready to stop running from it. He nodded slowly. Thank you, he whispered, eyes glistening. For not giving up on me. I reached over and clinked my glass gently against his. I never could. That fall, we hosted our first real family gathering in years, something we hadn't done since before my mother passed. The house was alive again. Cousins came from all over. Neighbors brought sweet tea and pound cake. Kids darted through the backyard, chasing each other under the string lights we'd hung between the trees. There was music in every room, laughter on every stair, and warmth in every corner. Zaria's name never came up, not even once. She had become a footnote in a season we had survived. A shadow that no longer had power over the light we reclaimed. But the house? It stood proud. It stood whole. And for the first time in a long while, no one questioned who it belonged to. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the dishes were done, I sat alone in the dining room, staring at the old wooden table. The same table that had once been cast aside like garbage now gleamed under the soft light, polished and proud. Every scratch, every dent, every water ring, it told a story. And finally, those stories were safe. If you've ever had to defend something sacred, whether it was a home, your peace, your voice, you know that feeling. That ache. That unshakable knowing that some things are not replaceable. That legacy isn't just passed down, it's protected, piece by piece, word by word, moment by moment. And maybe that's the real inheritance. Not just the bricks or photos or recipes. But the courage to say, this matters. So if this story moved you, or reminded you of a time when you had to stand up for what was yours, I want you to know, you're not alone. Please share your story in the comments. Tell us about the time you chose strength over silence, truth over comfort. And if you believe stories like this help shine a light on the quiet bravery behind family bonds, healing, and self-respect, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. This is your reminder, a house may be made of walls, but a home is built with voice, memory, and love. And no one, not even the most polished intruder, can take that away from you.